You ever have one of those moments where you just stand there, thinking, this can't be real life. This has to be a skit or something? That was me, standing in my own driveway, watching the president of my neighborhood association scream into her phone, calling 911, because she couldn't open my backyard gate. Not because someone was hurt, not because there was danger, but because she couldn't let herself into my yard, a yard she had no business being in to begin with. And the wildest part? That was just the beginning. It started a week earlier. I live in this quiet cul-de-sac where people usually wave when they drive by, the kind of place where neighbors borrow sugar and talk about football in the driveway. Nothing dramatic ever really happens. So when I noticed muddy boot prints around the back of my house one morning, it didn't sit right with me. I don't wear boots, and I sure hadn't invited anyone back there. I pulled up the footage from my outdoor camera, and there she was, Carla Jennings, president of the Oak Ridge HOA, walking into my yard like she owned the place. Clipboard in hand, oversized sunglasses even though it was cloudy, moving like some kind of sheriff looking to bust an outlaw. At the monthly HOA meeting, I asked her straight up, Carla, why were you in my backyard last Tuesday? She didn't even blink, just flipped through her papers and said, routine inspection. HOA bylaws give us the right to check for unauthorized modifications. I laughed. Modifications? I just repainted my deck. Same color as before. She tilted her chin, lips tight. You didn't submit a form. We can't take your word for it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about rules, it was about control. So I did what any sane person would do. I bought a smart lock for my gate, installed it that same night, synced it to my phone, and finally felt like I had my property under control. 3 days later, I heard it. Metal rattling, then pounding, then her voice, sharp and shrill. Open this gate right now. You're obstructing official HOA business. I stepped out of my garage and said, calm as I could, you're not getting in, Carla. She went full battle mode, clipboard up like a sword, blouse flapping in the wind, and that look in her eyes that every retail worker recognizes. I'm calling the police, she snapped. And I laughed, because come on, who calls the cops because they can't trespass? But she actually did it. She stood there, dialed, and told dispatch. Yes, I'd like to report a homeowner refusing access. I'm the HOA president. He's got a lock preventing me from entering. 3 minutes later, a cruiser rolled up. The officer stepped out looking like he already regretted getting that call. You the homeowner? He asked me. Yep, this is my property. That's my gate. And that, I pointed at Carla, is the woman who keeps trying to walk into my backyard without permission. Carla jumped in. He's obstructing inspections. The cop just looked at her. Ma'am, do you have a warrant? A court order. I'm the HOA president. That's not a warrant, he said flatly. I almost clapped right there. But here's the thing. Carla wasn't embarrassed. She was furious. She stormed off, muttering about lawsuits. And the next morning, I found a big orange notice taped to my front door. Non-compliant structure pending review. Gate lock in violation. Must be removed within 72 hours. That's when it hit me. She wasn't going to stop. And she didn't. I started getting letters in the mail, fake fines, even an email supposedly from a law firm saying I was jeopardizing my standing as a resident in good faith. The phrasing was so ridiculous I actually called the firm, and they had no idea what I was talking about. That's when I realized Carla wasn't just harassing me, she was impersonating lawyers. I gathered everything. The letter, the fake email, the video of her trying to bust into my yard, and brought it all to a detective at the sheriff's office. When I told him she'd faked legal documents, he leaned back in his chair and said, that's not just harassment, that's fraud. So when the next HOA meeting came around, I showed up with a folder under my arm and the detective sitting quietly in the back. Carla was at the front, smiling like nothing had happened. But when it was time for community concerns, I stood up, plugged in a USB stick, and played the video of her rattling my gate like a burglar. The room went quiet. Then I held up the fake email. This was sent from a spoof domain pretending to be a law firm. That's impersonation of legal authority. The detective stood up, walked to the front, and handed her his card. Ma'am, you'll need to come speak with us. Her face drained of color. Neighbors started whispering, then speaking out loud. She's been threatening people for years. She fined me for my grass being too tall when I was out of town for a funeral. One by one, the stories came out. And just like that, Carla's grip on the neighborhood cracked. But here's where the story twists again. A week later, I get a thick envelope in my mailbox, no return address. Inside, HOA financial records, meeting transcripts, handwritten notes. And right there on page 4, payments, thousands of dollars, supposedly to a landscaping company. Except the address was Carla's daughter's house. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was embezzlement. I took it straight to the detective. He shook his head. This isn't petty anymore. This is a criminal conspiracy. And sure enough, when the board dug into the records, it turned out Carla wasn't alone. 2 other board members had been signing off on bogus invoices, funneling money through shell companies tied to their families. We're talking close to $80,000 over 3 years. Fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. By the time the county prosecutor got involved, the neighborhood was in shock. People who'd been too scared to speak up finally started talking. We held emergency meetings, voted in new bylaws, stripped the board of unchecked power, and for the first time in years, the community actually felt like a community again. Kids rode their bikes, people shared food, neighbors stopped being scared of each other. And Carla? She was arrested. Multiple charges: wire fraud, impersonating legal authority, embezzlement. The others followed. One day I looked out and saw for sale signs popping up in front of their houses. Quiet exits, no goodbyes. The neighborhood transformed after that. We wrote new rules. Every vote recorded, every dollar accounted for, every vendor verified. Transparency became the new law of the land. And somehow, without ever planning to, I ended up on the new compliance committee. Not because I wanted power, but because people had seen what happens when no one pushes back. Months later, I was locking my gate, still smart, still mine, when a kid rode by on his bike and called out, "Hey, thanks for fixing the neighborhood." I laughed. Didn't do it alone, kid. But deep down, I knew standing up that first time had set everything in motion. And here's the kicker. Just when we thought it was all over, another anonymous email showed up. A spreadsheet with 3 more names. Turns out Carla hadn't been working alone from the start. There were still layers we hadn't uncovered. So I'll leave it here, with the question that keeps me up some nights. In a neighborhood where trust was shattered, how much do we really know about the people holding the clipboards, making the rules, knocking on our doors? What do you think? Was Carla just a power-hungry neighbor who went too far, or was she part of something bigger the whole time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear if you've ever dealt with an HOA or community drama like this, and what side you'd be on. And if you enjoyed the ride, hit subscribe, because trust me, the story isn't over yet.